All right. So, did everybody have fun last night? What's new and exciting in the world of renegades? You guys are all renegade hypnotists, almost fully certified now. Right? How's that feel? Yeah? What are you going to do with your newfound Jedi abilities, John?
Practice on people.
Practice on people. Come here, zap! I can just see him at his next roll game. Want to see a trick?
How much do you want that trick? Scale of 1 to 10.
I could see him doing this on the GM, too.
Those would be some of the most fun things to do. It's just like, we've got 2 pieces of treasure and 3 people. So let's divvy it up. What do you mean you both want to give it to me? I don't understand. You know, you're getting that one that you want.
How about you, JP? What do you got?
What do I got? What am I doing?
What are your plans for these skills?
What's the pinky in the brain?
Take over the world.
Yeah,
World domination's an admirable goal.
yeah. In more of a brain, more of a pinky way as opposed to the brain. I thought, like, it's more fun to be that kind of a character.
Right on. What about you, Seth?
So, being better at the stuff I'm doing somewhat now, helping people who I choose to help.
Well, I think that's really the only people you should help.
Well, it's really nice to have the complete freedom of, well, you're my friend, I like you, so your migraine is about to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like you. Go to your room and lie down.
It brings up in a very obnoxious and obnoxious way, that's actually a very important truth. You are not obligated to help anyone. Okay? There's a lot of people who think that once they get skill sets that it's their obligation to heal anybody with any kind of boo-boo on the planet. The sad fact is most of them don't want help. In spite of the words coming out of their mouth. You know, they just don't want the help. They haven't suffered enough. And I think we talked about this a little bit, but the truth of the matter is most people are in some kind of pain, physically or emotionally. They simply haven't suffered enough yet to want to actually do something about it. And sometimes the best thing you can do for those people is let them suffer. It sounds harsh, but it's just the human condition. Okay, we talked about motivation, pain versus pleasure. We talked about thresholds. These things are just, they're operational in human behavior. And especially I really got into this really happened for me when I got it, my first time I got my first energy healing credential, which was Reiki, back in the early 90s, back when it actually still was kind of hard to find, and you couldn't become a master in a weekend. I wanted to heal everybody on the, everybody get, oh, let me do this. No, they don't want it. You can't go around forcing this shit on people. Okay? What you really need to do is set up tests. I tell my attraction students, whether you're male or female, always be testing. Always be testing. Your clients, always be testing. Test them by the price you charge and the instructions that you give them. Hold them accountable. Most people don't want to be accountable. That's why they're stuck. They spend most of their time running away from the responsibility and or the accountability. Right? Responsibility just means able to do something about it. Accountable means you pay the price for it. Right? So, Big Jacob, what are you going to do with all these these newfound Jedi skills?
I'm going to work on myself.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Change whatever I want to change.
Nice. Feel pretty. How do you feel about your ability to do that?
I can do it.
I know, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big Saul.
Integration.
Integration?
Yeah. Keep moving.
Keep moving. Where are you moving to now? I have no idea.
That's actually the one nice thing in my life at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Right on. David.
Don't know. I guess self-improvement, I guess.
Self-improvement? Self-work is the most important. I firmly believe that you're no good to the world until you build up yourself. The more resources you have at your disposal, the more benefit you can be to the world at large. Some of the most miserable people I know are the ones who give everything away and then and then wonder why the world doesn't reciprocate. You know, because they give expecting a return in terms of, you know, the rewards will be reaped in heaven or whatever. Well, most people don't realize you can negotiate that.
That's not giving, that's investing.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Actually, well, yeah, honestly. You know, there's a metaphor when I was studying Kabbalah, and I still study Kabbalah a lot because once you get past the religious aspects of it, all mystical disciplines share a common structure. And that structure will reveal to you the principles on which the universe runs. Has nothing to do with morals, has very little to do with ethics. Those are just rules made by man to control man. They're incremental interpretations away from universal principle. We try, in other words, this is the mechanics of the universe, this must be why it works. This must be why I must behave this way. And then all of a sudden they get degree by degree to degree, and all of a sudden you have a dogma that gets further and further away from the structure. So we need to start peeling back, start looking at structure. When we can look at the world in terms of structure and process, the universe reveals its secrets to you. Okay? But in order to do that effectively, we have to peel away the ethics and moral lessons and look at mechanics. And you'll get a much cleaner sense of ethics from that, because you'll understand where the universe begins, or where the universe ends and people begin. If that makes any kind of sense. And I'm a little fuzzy this morning, so, you know. Huh? Yeah. So where was I going with this? See how you open loop me, you bastards. Anyway, seek structure. The universe will reveal its secrets to you. Eric, what are you going to do with this shit?
Balance and harmony.
Balance and harmony? What the fuck is that?
Whatever the fuck it is. Physical means self-development, and this is what it comes down to.
Yeah. In the end, we're all in this alone together. It's the truth. I mean, we're all traveling a parallel path, but we're all on our own. And while we may share each other's company for a short or long period of time, at the end of the day, you came into this world alone, you're going out alone. Right? Where you wind up? Well, we'll let the theologians discuss that. Right? All right, so you've heard me mention. Oh, I guess I didn't get to Tara. Our token female in the back row here.
Of course, I didn't integrate it in my practice, but I decided a couple of days ago to give myself tasks. I mean, I trusted it's in my unconscious, but to actually play with different aspects out in the world, like I'm going to go out and focus on this. Because just trying to do it all at once would be overwhelming. So I'm just trying to see that technique and try to use it.
Well, that's good. That's exactly what you should do. My recommendation with all of this material is find the elements of the training that you really, really liked and you're really, really good at. And go out and do those first. Because as a rule, those will be the most fun, the ones you'll get the most proficiency with the fastest, and they'll build the foundation and the confidence to start tackling other things. They're the ones you're most likely to create unconscious confidence with at the highest possible rate. And it's just going to generalize that way. Okay, and once it becomes part of you, you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's just there whenever you need it. Most people try to do everything and wind up being able to do nothing, or they invert the model and try to do the things they suck at the most first. So
they have the highest failure rate.
Oh, hell yeah. Bruce Lee was the first one to say, Bruce Lee fought southpaw. He fought with his right side forward. He always fought with his strongest arm and his best side forward. And he was unstoppable, or so they say. But everybody else, right? You know, I find that if you just make your strengths unstoppable, you're usually going to be better off than focusing on your weaknesses. Now, that doesn't mean you ignore them. You make what you're good at unstoppable. And then build. Okay? One of the things Professor used to do, Professor Remy Prisas, I studied with him, he was the Grandmaster of Modern Arnis. He'd say, work your right hand. He would say, make you work left and right. But he would say, the better your right hand gets, the better your left hand will start to get sympathetically. So, or vice versa. Anything you can do, to make get better at what you're already doing well. I mean, I know that sounds, it goes against what most of us are taught, but really.
It depends on the form of your goal.
Hmm?
If you want to be as good as you can, say in fighting, well, if you have one unblockable punch that's going to knock anyone out, you win. On the other hand, if your goal is balance of some sort, then you have to work on your weak points.
Yep. John LaTourette tells a story when he's trained several world champions in the earlier part of his career. He took a guy who really wanted to fight in a tournament, taught him one punch and one kick, drilled him on it for 3 months. Guy knew nothing. Entered him in a tournament as a brown belt, the guy took first place. He only had one punch and one kick. Back fist, side kick. Back fist, side kick. Or it's a sun punch. Actually, it was what we call a sun punch reverse punch. That was all he had. He didn't have a kick. And the guy took first, coming in 3 months training as a brown belt, at brown belt level. There's magic in overlearning a few core techniques. That's what CPI is all about. CPI is so powerful because it's based on the model I use to teach martial arts. Becoming tremendously good at a very narrow skill set that's cross-contextual. So that wherever you go, whatever you do, you have it on demand. Boxers only have 5 punches in their entire arsenal. And yet, they can hit you in any combination, from any angle, at will, and be devastatingly effective. The secret is going deep, not broad. Okay? Universal principle. Okay. Yes?
I just have to mention one thing though. If you have your dominant side, if you keep on practicing that dominant side, just like you were mentioning earlier in the days, that routes or deepens that movement. But if you have to break the movement, I do this. This is how we was taught drums or teaching drummers is you practice the weak side because it knows absolutely nothing.
Right.
So for that regards, it retrains the right.
Okay.
So it can go either way.
And drummers are actually a really good example of how to train both sides of your brain. I've always envied drummers. I hate them because I can't do it. But,
if you can dance, you can drum.
yeah. Well, I'm a white guy, so you know how that works.
Okay, you can't jump.
That's all right. We've seen different movies, I say. You've heard me talk about center, identity. We want to revisit that because what we're going to be doing today, this morning especially, is we're going to be revisiting, or we're going to be putting the cherry on top of this Identity by Design Sunday, so to speak. And let me just grab my markers. As in my frenzy to get things done, I neglected to grab those. And to go into this eraser. Just as by way of review, for you smart people out there, Seth. And Seth. Hey, John.
Hey.
What is identity?
Piece of idea.
Yeah, that's that. No, that's proof you have one. What's identity? What is it?
I am.
I am.
I don't know, collection of beliefs.
Collection of beliefs. That's all?
Beliefs, behaviors.
Beliefs and behaviors.
Some function of who you are.
Some function of who you are. What do you think?
No, I mean, it's an internal, and it's also the process of how the world sees you. There's a combination of who you are inside and then the world around.
A combination of how you see yourself and how other people see you. Okay. John, what do you think? Mr. Role Player?
Collection of suits attached to beliefs.
Okay.
All react depending on the circumstance.
To me, it's all yet nothing, because your identity can change depending on the context or circumstance.
Okay. Obviously, you've been through one too many of my trainings. John, what's identity?
Set of beliefs about this person thinks are always true about them.
Okay. The word's coming back to haunt me in many different forms. It's interesting. Well, the Russian schools, in the book especially, Red Gold, which is a book on Russian autogenic training, there's a word that I keep in my life that keeps coming up in many different contexts, and it tends to begin to relate to or at least to allude to the same thing. Soviet autogenics cognitive behavioral therapy, and everything else, which is pretty much all the disciplines that kind of come together. The interesting thing about what Soviets are saying about how the mind and the body work, when they talk about the essence of who you are, they start getting almost borderline New Agey, which is weird considering the science and the culture from which this came from. But they basically look at your true essence is the seed of consciousness within you. That's who you truly are, is the seed of the consciousness within you. When we talk about identity, or we talk about self, or specifically because of what this particular process is about, we're talking about self-identity or self-concept, and also self-worth. Because what happens is, because human beings have the power to engage in reflective thought, we can reflect upon ourselves. We are self-aware, and we are aware that we are self-aware, which is a very different concept than most animals. And many animals look in a mirror, they see another animal. Very few animals realize it's their reflection. Okay? We not only know we exist, we recognize our reflection, and we recognize that we recognize it's a reflection. The byproduct of that is that we begin to analyze and judge what we see. And we place an arbitrary value on that. And because we're reflecting in two different directions at the same time, internally and externally, we project what we see and we feel and we believe onto the neurologies of the people around us. And they begin to take on the behaviors that we project into them. Okay? You've heard me reference this as the acceptance, rejection, projection, connection. The term that the Soviets like to use for that seed of consciousness within you is called your center. JP, you got this Cheshire Cat grin on your face. You either passed gas and don't want anybody to know it, or you're having a thought.
It's both.
Okay. It was a gassy thought, right?
It's a gassy thought.
Want to share, or you just want to...
No, mine's just racing in every direction, so I can't catch anything.
Do we need to get you guys focused this morning?
Oh, no, I am focused, but at the same time, there's
Okay.
sparks connecting, I guess.
Okay. So, the seed of consciousness within you is your center. It's your truest identity that we can actually conceive of. Does that make sense? Cognitive behavioral therapy, much newer discipline, tells us that our self-worth is derived, our true self-worth as a human being is derived from the seed of consciousness in each of us. which means at an arbitrary level, the true value in every human being is the seat of consciousness within us. Which means, since we all have one, and they all pretty much come from the same source, that is the basis of our value as a being. Everything else is an arbitrary decision. Does that make sense?
As part of the creation.
As a conscious being, we're invaluable. We have a priceless value. Everything else is a judgment. Does that make sense? Those judgments are based on the information that was imprinted on us when we incarnated, when we took on a body, from the time we were conceived to the time we begin to become more self-aware. Okay? Those identities and those value judgments are based on your early formative childhood experiences. Positive or negative is actually something that comes later. You have to remember that when you're conceived, you come into this world as a blank hard drive. You have no basis for comparison of anything. So the first thing that begins to happen is the new body acquires data. It needs to acquire data in which to begin to hang hooks or to make comparisons. Okay? So whatever gets in there first becomes what's familiar. Whatever it becomes familiar becomes the foundation upon which everything else is judged. Okay? As we evolve, the first sets of influences on us are the people closest to us, usually our parents or significant teachers, things like that, right? Those voices, those imprints, start to create within us almost a mini hologram of them, for lack of a better word. We carry those imprints with us, and they start to talk to us. They start telling us what we deserve, what we don't deserve. We make value judgments based on that. Make sense? We also begin to become acclimated to acting certain ways and believing certain things in different circumstances. We start to take on identities or personas, sets of behaviors and sets of beliefs that are context dependent. The problem is, or the fly in the ointment is, that we fool ourselves into thinking that these sets of patterns that we walk around in are us. We forget, we become so absorbed in the reflection in the mirror, we forget what's doing the reflecting. And so we become identified with these suits of clothes, the reflections, and then the reflections of the reflections, until finally we forget the seed. Does that make sense? And so what the Soviets discovered in their process of their training their elite athletes, their military, and everything else, is that we have these, what they call, what's the word they used? I don't think it was subselves. It was co-personalities. Neuroscience has later discovered that within each of us there are about 10 to 12 neurological subroutines that are constantly running, and they tend to be pretty universal. Everything from parent to spouse to, all these different things, protector. But they're not just behaviors so much as they're sub-personalities. They have a pseudo-sentience within us that kind of run their own deal. Hypnosis and parts therapy people have been saying similar things for many, many, many years. But all these different disciplines are saying the same thing. We have different personas that we operate from, and they're triggered by context, as a rule. I'll show you how to trigger those later on. We'll probably do it in CPI when I talk about, because we can take one of the levels in CPI called pattern weaving, where we usually just start creating vivid, compelling stories. We can invert the model and cause people to shift identities just by asking certain questions. It's an inverse, but we'll get into it. What the Soviets also discovered was this, that anything you identify with, that you view or erroneously believe is you, has the power to control you. it becomes immutable. Interestingly, I think it was Bateson, but I first learned about it through Dilts and NLP, so we'll reference them. NLP says, and Dilts says, that the human psyche has these things called logical levels of belief, which starts at basically identity and then trickles down into capabilities, and there's a whole level here. We're not even going to deal with this today because we're going to go right to identity level. But there's basically six categories. I have it in my notes somewhere. I'll pull it out on a break or something, and we'll go through it. There's 6 categories of logical levels of belief, and depending on what level somebody's interacting at, you can change it by going to the next level above it. So if somebody's operating from a belief level, for instance, they're operating from something they believe about themselves. If I go to the next level above it, like for instance, I think it might be so it's belief capability, identity, belief capability, blah blah blah. If I go to the next level, I can change. If I change them at that level, it will control and shift everything below it. So if people say, I'm bad at math, well, that's an identity statement, right? It's something, it's part of who you are. It's impossible to change, right? But if I chunk it down, okay, I move them to a lower logical level. I say, well, maybe you just aren't sure how to do it yet, right? All of a sudden, it stops being something that's immutable and something that they have the potential to be able to change. Do you get the idea, the example? Okay. Linguistically, if we can get people to shift these logical levels, we can get a very significant change. But we have to get them out of the identity level first. Because the minute they've identified with it, they can't change it. Okay? So one of the processes that we learn to do as self-evolving beings, at least in this school, is we learn to systematically disidentify from everything that is not our seat of consciousness. Because when we do that, we gain control over all of it. We can custom design the system. Okay? So think of these logical levels as these frozen parts of our world that until we break them loose, we have no way to alter them. They're kind of frozen in place. Does that make sense? I'm trying to make Bateson was not a low-level thinker, so it's trying to chunk it down. And it bugs me that I can't remember the freaking list right now, but I'll pull it out of my notes later and we'll go through it. But for right now, everything we're going to be working with is about the identity level and moving things out of it so that we have the ability to change it, remove things we don't want or disempower things we don't want, amplify the things we do, build in the things that we'd rather have. The key behind this, though, is to remember that at your very essence, your truest level of self, all you are is the seat of consciousness within you. Everything else is a suit of clothing. Now, just like at your closets at home, you have your favorite shoes, your favorite jacket, your favorite anything, right? The one you're walking around in most often, the one you feel most comfortable in, is the one you're just most used to. It's still just a suit of clothes. So just like you can go to the store and buy new clothes, you find old ones, you get rid of them. Even though you've had those shoes for 20 years, at some point, it's just not serving you anymore, right? Nothing feels as good as an old shoe, right? At some point, you got to change them, right? So we're going to give you that ability. Yes?
So when you talk to clients about when you most feel like yourself, let's say, I want to go to a happy place and we'll start talking about happy, joyful, all that, which is really valuable because then we say, well, anything that's not feeling like that, we're going to shift it now. And that anything that's not that energy is something else. And it allows them to break free of that so that we can get them even more attached to that. But you were just saying it's just energy, you're going even deeper. See, like consciousness, it's just energy. That's just like essence, right? It doesn't necessarily even have any emotions or like joy or peace or anything attached to it, if I'm getting this correct rendering.
You are not your emotions, but you have them.
Yeah. But it's
Understand.
still a way of operating that they
Well,
can
again,
identify with.
you tend to use energy. You throw the word energy around pretty consistently. I don't view consciousness as energy. Okay, consciousness controls energy. In terms of the overall scope of things, everything is energy. So it's like saying nothing, because if it's everything, it's nothing too, right? We need to make distinctions. As a rule, consciousness informs energy. It gives energy instructions on what form to take. It's a vessel. Energy is a vessel. Your consciousness needs vessel to manifest. Okay? If you study the old disciplines and the Hermetics, one of the things that we talk about is that light cannot be revealed until it's concealed, which means it has to be given a vessel in order to manifest. Okay? So when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about the intelligence that now I'm not saying energy is not sentient. It's just it has a sentience, but it's a receptive sentience. It's waiting for instructions. That's where the whole science of magic comes from. Magic is about taking an idea or an intention and manifesting reality. Reality is just different forms of energy programmed to respond in a certain way. Okay? It's the interaction of consciousness and energetics, which are basically two elements of the same thing, which is the void. I don't want to get metaphysical on you, but I want you to understand consciousness and energy are yin and yang of each other. Only we view them on this side of the divide, we view them as separate. On another side, they are one and the same. They're undifferentiated. Okay, you can see a lot of this in a lot of the esoteric Buddhist mandalas, where they have the Kangai and whether from one side of the mandala you're seeing one picture. If you look on the other side, it's completely different. On one side of the divide, where we are, consciousness and energy are two distinct things, manifesting in infinite diversity. On the other side, it's undifferentiated. It's the void. Void is not empty. It's all potential. But that's not the purview of this class. Okay? But we want to understand, as Steve, and again, just to going back to the old Pickus line, how does that help me get more? Right? Your consciousness is you. Everything else is a suit of clothing that you've put on. Period, end of story. Yes?
So how do we go ahead and create this co-personality that's able to change everything else?
You don't. You remove the co-personalities that are in your way. You disidentify from the identities that you think are you, that you've grown accustomed to, and reallocate them at a lower level of self, or a lower level on the scale. So, we have covered the concept that the core of our consciousness, the seat of consciousness within us, is our true self. It's our true identity. It's the most fundamental, primal aspect of who we are as a being that we can contemplate, that we can conceptualize. Okay? You can think of it as your higher self if you want to. You can think of it as the interface between your higher self and your lower self. You can think of it however you want to think of it. Okay? But that's the place we want to get back to. We want to systematically remove the suits of clothes and arbitrary personas that we've bought into, that we have come to believe are the true aspects of who we are, and begin to operate from a higher place. Begin to see the world anew, to recreate that world anew. So So what I want you to do is I want you to sit back in your chairs while I eat my chocolate. Feed glucose into the system, because I'm about to put the whammy of all whammies on you. And then I will teach you what I did so that you can do it too. Okay? So take a deep breath in and let that breath out with a sigh. Close your eyes all the way down, deeper and deeper down. With every breath you take and every beat of your heart, just let your body go. In a moment, not yet, but in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to focus all of your attention on the lids of your eyes. I want you to begin to relax those eyelids so fully, so completely, that you couldn't actually open them without putting more tension back into them. And when you know they're that relaxed, you can test them, and test them once or twice, and then stop testing. And let that level of relaxation flow from the top of your head all the way down to the tips of your toes. Deeper and deeper. Down, down, down. Allow your attention now to begin to move to a space right between your eyebrows, slightly above the bridge of your nose. You may begin to breathe in through that area. As you do, I want you to begin to notice after a while, a pulsing may become noticeable. Allow that pulsing to become more obvious. And pay attention while you're relaxing as that pulsing energy begins to move down. Down through the bridge of your nose, your chin, into the throat. You may notice a pulsing in and around your throat. As it continues to move down into the space where when you breathe in, that breath travels down and goes into your heart. And as your mind begins to settle into that space, allow your mind to just rest there, inside your heart. Now, letting your breath flow in and out, circulating new thoughts, new ideas as you continue to relax. Now, once upon a time, there may have been somebody in your life that you turn to for the best advice possible. Someone that you completely trust. If you haven't had anybody in your life like that, imagine what it would be like when you're young. To be around somebody who always told you the truth. Who always told you the very best thing about you. And you knew deep inside that this voice was a voice you could trust. A voice you could believe above all others that would always tell you what's good about you, what you need to know to make the best decision, to give you all the right elements, things, details that you could thrive and survive, to understand and learn. A voice of absolute trust. A voice of absolute power, safety, and security. I know I have a voice like that. A voice that tells me all the good things I need to know about me. That tells me what to do when times are rough and when to do them, to make things the best they could possibly be. A voice of absolute trust and authority. And as you think about that voice, and you hear it. I want you to notice that there's a feeling, a wonderful feeling, associated, connected to that voice. And that voice and that feeling have a space in your body, a location. And I want you to allow your mind to drift into that energy, into that space in your body. And I want you to notice that there's a color associated with that energy. And I want you to begin to notice it's moving. And notice how it's moving. And as you begin to simply observe it, to pay attention to it, to focus all of your senses into it, that energy begins to grow, begins to expand, becomes louder and louder, that voice growing stronger and stronger within you, telling you all the things you most want and need to know, filling you with that safety, that security, that absolute sense of self. Allow yourself to just listen to that voice talking to you, telling you all the things that are really important. Feel the truth in those words as that energy continues to cycle all throughout your mind and all throughout your body. And notice, interestingly, how that energy, as it continues to grow stronger and stronger, just like the pillars of power exercise you did, how that voice of trust, that voice of authority, begins to circulate through your heart, through your mind, through your spirit. And it begins to grow louder, drowning out any other voice, until all you can hear, all you can become aware of, all that really matters is that voice of absolute trust. This voice of absolute authority, telling you what's really true, what's really important, what you really need to do next. That tells you all the good things about you you might have forgotten. Now. And as you continue to listen to that voice, you can begin to notice something changing in your body. It's almost as if part of you is beginning to lift, to ascend out of your physical body, even as that voice continues to speak. Feel yourself lifting out of the physical body. Because you have a body, a physical body. But you're far more than just a body. Feel yourself lifting out of your emotional body. Because you have emotions, but you're far more than just your emotions. Feel yourself lifting up out of your mental body. Because you have thoughts. But we all know you're more than your thoughts. You're something else. You're your center. And as you continue to float up above those aspects of yourself, realizing the truth, realizing you're far more than any of what you see below. And you continue to rise higher and higher. And as you rise above even this physical plane, as we think of it, you can begin to notice a line, a glowing line of what looks like some form of energy. One part extending off into what you intuitively know is the future and all of your future potentials, while the other side of that line, well, that's the past. Your own personal line of time. with all of your memories, all of your experiences. And as you continue to float higher and higher, deeper into the center that is you, you begin to realize even more powerfully that you have a future, but you're far more than your future. You have memories, you have a past, but you are far more, far greater than your past. And as that realization within you becomes absolute, you begin to find yourself, your consciousness, that seed of consciousness that is you, beginning to float backwards along that line of time. Back through the past, over the past, over the past. Backwards, past your early adult memories, or your current adult memories, into your early adult memories, backwards through your early childhood memories. Back to the time in the womb, and then even further into a place that exists before you were conceived, before you took on a body, and that exists when you leave this body. A place we call the womb of eternity. And you can remember what it's like to be in this place, to feel this timeless energy surrounding you. And it feels like home. A place from where your consciousness emerged. A place of absolute contentment and truth, where everything is possible and nothing has happened yet. Where changes made here become unstoppable, become preordained. And in this place, surrounded by this warmth, this soothing darkness, or whatever it is for you, maybe it's dark, maybe it's light, it doesn't really matter, because it's your understanding of this wonderful place, where your seed of consciousness resided before it took on that body and will return again, where all things are possible and all things are inevitable. From this place, there's this voice. This voice of absolute trust, of love, of wisdom. And from this place, you can listen as it tells you all of the things you need to know, all of the things you want to understand, to prepare you, to give you everything you want and need to survive and to thrive, to make every event that happens once you take on a body and forward in time the best and only better. So as you allow this voice to penetrate, to touch the deepest levels of your center, that consciousness within you, feel everything you could ever want, need to know, feel, and understand at the deepest, most fundamental level. Penetrating, seeping into you, the truth about the life to come, filling you with all the resources, all the love, wisdom, safety, understanding you could ever need. And as if by some hidden cue, when you know there's a sudden understanding, a sudden recognition within you that it's time to move forward. And you find yourself moving forward in time, to the time of conception, bringing with you all of that knowledge, all of those insights, all of that understanding, And as you take on that physical form, you bring with you the realization, I have a body now. And yet I am still far more. As you find yourself growing within that physical womb, moving forward through birth and those formative years, becoming aware of how what was has changed because you've changed at the most primal, fundamental level. Feeling and becoming aware of how your entire line of time is different now because you're different. Filled with everything you could ever want or need to know to survive and thrive. Realizing that as you go through early childhood, moving through your early adult and teen years, moving through those other years, through the present and into the future, how it's all shifted, continues to shift. And you continue to rocket forward into the future, deeper and deeper, seeing how life only changes for the better as you continue to learn about yourself, to tap into your own abilities, realizing that no matter how many things you acquire, no matter how many things change in the body, you are still far more than any of it. And at some preordained point, you find your forward progress continues, but another aspect of your consciousness just kind of slows down. It begins to rise up, and it begins to move backwards along that line of time, observing all of the things that have already changed because you've changed. And now allow yourself to drift back over that line of time, just like before, back to the womb of eternity. And see yourself making that journey again, bringing with you all of that accumulated wisdom, all of that accumulated knowledge and understanding. And still, there's this voice that tells you, that teaches you, that shares with you all the things that are good about yourself. And it stores itself, it locks itself into a place within you that's always 10 times stronger than any other voice. Because this voice has been with you from the beginning of your time and will remain through the end of time. Always 10 times stronger, 10 times louder, 10 times truer, more loving than anything you may hear, any other voice, easily drowning out anything that tries to get in the way. Because this is the voice of absolute trust and authority in your world. I have a voice like that. You have a voice like that. And it's a voice that only grows stronger with each passing experience, each passing beat of your heart, filling you with everything you want and need to move, to survive, to thrive. And now, at the speed of thought, at the speed that's right for you, you begin to cycle from the womb of eternity through your own personal timeline and into the future. And at some unimagined, preordained point, you simply rise up above that timeline and flow back to the womb over and over again, learning, evolving, cementing in everything. That's right. Faster and faster. Feeling the shifts, allowing them to take place. Feeling that deep sense of self. And when you know you've got it, you feel and experience all of those shifts And you realize it's only going to get better for you by your standards, by your definitions. Allow yourself to return to the present and see the world from this new place, filled and sustained and guided in your center and the voice of authority. Now. I think I'll give you guys 5 minutes.